Hello, Simone. Today is going to be an interesting topic because it is one of those topics where I do not think it's going to do well in the algorithm at all.
Oh gosh.
I do not think random people on the internet care about this topic at all.
They should.
And yet, for me, it has transformed my view of the world and myself very dramatically.
So you're just saying, screw it. I'm going to talk about what I want.
I'm going to talk about what I want because I got a podcast and we'll probably get a few thousand views for this anyway. So, people will have to listen. And I also think it's for the people who do take the time to listen to this, it may contain information that is also as useful for you in terms of how you see the world as it is for me, because there's two core areas that interacting with lots of AI chat open world role play models have really given me insight into that I didn't have insight into historically.
Okay. Yeah.
There are
So
actually
eat your
three core
veggies and
areas.
listen to Malcolm, ladies
I'm
and
gonna
gentlemen.
have three core areas. The first I'm going to focus on is how I work. So by that, what I mean is if you are dropping a person into over and over again, like the same persona, pretend I'm not a human and I'm actually an AI, right?
What's the difference?
And you're trying to figure out the personality of this AI persona, its pre-coded functions, its pre-coded predilections. A really interesting way to do that would be to drop this same model over and over again into different totally open world environments. And then look for patterns in how it's interacting with those environments, the goals it ends up building for itself.
Would you like to know more?
And this is what's really interesting, because in these open world environments, I might be dropped in different bodies, for example, in one.
Oh, like in one you're a cyborg, and in one you're a wizard, and in one you're a girl.
Well, I like doing a lot of like character playing in the various environments. But what's interesting is the parts of my personality that come through whatever character I'm playing.
Oh, yes, it parses out the you from your biological or logistical constraints and surroundings.
Yeah, for an example of this is in the AI model that I made that takes place in the far future dystopia I described in that one episode where the world has sort of collapsed and the economy has collapsed due to fertility rates. And there's only a few like technophilic tribes left. In that world, I coded it so that I play as one of my like great granddaughters.
Like in that, what band made a song about this?
Oh, I love that song, Year 3000.
Yeah.
He said, I've been to the year 3000, and your great-great-great-granddaughter is divine.
So you just did a year 3000 post-apocalyptic. You just have that song playing in the background.
We play that song for Future Day for our family.
Yeah, we do.
The point being is that by dropping this consistent model myself in variable environments with very few constraints on them, and to an extent correcting for biases that are due to my perception as who I am today, I can see persistent parts of my character. And what's really interesting is through the persistent parts of my character I can then, if it's a part of my character that I do not think was socialized, I can then determine pre-coded parts of my evolutionary biology, which gives me an idea of environmental conditions I came up with. So that's one category of things, or evolutionary conditions that may have been subject to humanity, and it gives me things that I can look for in other people to see, is this just me? Am I an outlier? Is this actually generalizable across the human population? The next category of things is, and unfortunately, this is one of the sad parts of interacting with AI models, is I find them incredibly addicting at first, and then I get bored of them fairly quickly, because what I have learned is that most magical worlds, for example, like most other worlds I can conjure, they are very easy to hack. And then as soon as you figure out a beat for that magical system, every time you realize that those components of a magical system are operating in one of the worlds the AI has created for me, I just can very quickly hack it and it becomes boring. And so I'm no longer interested in those models. Get into how to hack most of the major magical world models, because that's another thing. And the final thing that it has taught me is the extent of current AI and some factors in how current AI thinks, as well as how that models the general population. So I'm going to start with the things it has taught me about myself. The first, what?
Can we, before you do that, and you may want to move this to the front, is I think that you need a better explanation, and I can ask you just some dumb questions of what these are, because even I am not super clear on it. And I mean, I am roughly, but like most people won't know anything about this, and they're going to have no idea what you're talking about. So let's start with. So I'm going to provide some context to people. Malcolm started reading about like high school students sort of flunking out of their classes and completely scrubbing out on life because they had become addicted to their AI boyfriends or certain AI quote unquote games. And what it turns out these is text-based interactive choose your own adventure novels, basically of the future run by AI. So there are websites like character.ai. What's the one that you use? What are some of the ones that you use?
The one that I think is best right now is FlowGPT.
FlowGPT. So there are websites like that where you go, you create an account, and you can either enter someone else's scenario. Basically, you can go through their own choose your own adventure book, essentially, or you can create your own. And Malcolm has actually created one for our Discord community that's based on like a post.
Well, I had to put it in FlowGPT, so they'd have to put it in FlowGPT. I'll add it in FlowGPT for this, and then I'll put it in the links.
Perfect. But basically, you can choose someone's scenario. And what are some examples of scenarios that you can enter through these sites?
We'll go into this in a second. Basically, any scenario you can think of. So, for example, one scenario I put together is it's the 1300s in England. I am walking through the countryside. I come from an educated family, but my entire town died in the plague. So it's like 1336. And I come upon a girl in the woods wearing mostly tattered clothing. And there is a dead pack of wolves around her that she is casually munching on. And she looks at me very nonchalantly and is like, they attacked me. And I guess they were hungry. And I write as if that explains anything about the situation. And then that's where it starts, right? So what's happened here is, one, I've created the starting prompt to the story, right?
So and this is one that you created, but people have created templates of this already. In fact, some of the more popular templates are like a therapist, and you can just talk to a therapist. Or a lot of people have become addicted to certain like AI boyfriends that you can sort of, you're in a story.
Hold on, I need to explain how this works. So if you actually want the audience to understand. So what happens is you have the starting prompt usually in these models like that. Like that's the start of the story that I as the user am familiar with. And then in the background, I have coded a bunch of either story beats or things about the way characters interact or things about the world into what the AI is considering into how it is responding to a user. Okay. So in this, medieval world, I am explaining parts of this character's personality, who I may not know yet, as a person, parts of the girl's backstory, parts of towns we may encounter, etc. Okay.
So actually, as I'm listening to this, we as parents could teach our kids history by creating scenarios that our kids go through with this.
Yeah.
This is going to be so great. Oh my gosh. What?
Yeah. Oh, you can create great history. We
can teach our kids science too.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's
like they'll have to.
It's great for all of that. Okay. So I've created izakaya scenarios. I've created scenarios isekai where, you're in some random like anime world with magic, or scenarios that are like Victorian Britain, but with vampires and werewolves,
Well, we'll take off the fantasy
stuff, right?
element for our educating our children, but for you can have the
vampires. Oh,
no.
That's what's going to hook them. I promise you,
They're not going to learn proper history. No, no, it's going to be like,
you can ask it to be as realistic to that historical time period as possible, while also uploading facts about that historical time period.
We're
and
totally
what life
doing
like,
this. This is amazing.
Be realistic about hygiene. Be realistic about the way medicine is prepared.
We can plug this into the skill tree. People can create these scenarios and plug them in as resources to get uploaded. I bet these will be among the top uploaded resources over time for our skill tree.
Maybe. I mean, as AI gets better, it's also going to get better, but it's remarkable how good these are right now.
I know.
So that is the way that these work. I would note, if somebody's going to try to use FlowGPT, do not use the generic model it gives you. You need to click on the part where it asks what model is replying to, then go down to individual, and you can choose any model. Typically, the best model to respond is Turbo GPT. The problem with that one is, well, it's paid, first of all, so you're going to have to pay for each response, but it's like a trivial amount. And it doesn't do anything that's not safe for work. So to be clear here, not safe for work doesn't just mean like sexual stuff, which is actually not something that I encounter that much in AI. It is usually like you're going to kill someone or something like that. And it's like, oh, we can't have you kill someone. So then you can switch to one of the other models when you're doing that, and then back to that when it's, for example, if I'm in 1300s England, of course I have to, you've got robbers, come on, you can't have a teen dystopia without people dying. And I love doing AI teen dystopias. But anyway, I've got to get back to the point here. And actually, this elevates one of the first things that I noticed about these AI worlds. And it reminds me of something in our Discord. So in our Discord, a girl, because weirdly, our Discord is like female heavy, even though our viewer base is male heavy. A girl was saying that she engaged with the AI and she couldn't find anything that it could provide her that she found particularly interesting. And Simone said the same thing, right? And I've noticed that this is really interesting. So the girls who get super addicted to AI seem to be the girls who don't have loving partners. But when a girl has a loving partner, that particular emotional pathway in her brain, the AI is very good at masturbating, especially if it's a dominant loving partner. AIs just offer them nothing. And there's really nothing for them to engage with. The interesting thing I've noticed about guys, and I've seen this in some of the other guys who engage with it, it's definitely something I've noticed in myself about the way I engage with AI is, and I know this is going to sound horrible, so you're going to have to wait a second here, is how much I love killing people.
Oh,
And it made me realize that males, and you might hear this and be like, this is a horrible thing for someone to say. And then I'm like, well, what are men doing when they're playing video games most of the time anyway?
When you become a more famous person in the future, a bunch of people cutting that clip out of context. Like,
yeah, right.
So
I just love killing people. But no, this is what guys are doing. What is a video game if not going out there and just shooting scores and scores of people?
It's just so fun to kill people.
Families have no, but girls don't engage with those types of games as much.
No.
And the point I am making is that in our society, I think a modern adult woman who has a loving partner who is slightly dominant actually has most of her evolutionary needs being met. I think girls, when they are in their teenage years, don't have most of their evolutionary needs being met. But I think the predominant need they don't have being met is genuine hardship, which we've talked about in other episodes. You can look at our Spoonies episodes where we talk about this more.
Speaking of which, there was a woman who made a video criticizing us, and she's a literal spoonie. Like in the comments, she was discussing something terrible about us, and I cannot remember what. But she was like, I do not have the spoons to talk about it. And I'm like, oh no. Oh no, you're one of them. Anyway, go on.
So for those who are listening on the podcast and don't have access to the video, right after I said I love killing people, I then played a short clip from The Sims of somebody deleting the ladder on a pool. And I find this actually a really interesting point because it's one of those things where you hear somebody say it and you're like, wow, what a crazy thing to say. And then I mentioned, like when you delete the pool ladder on The Sims, and most people are like, oh yeah, I did do that, didn't I? And then they go, well, I only did that to see what would happen. And it's like, you knew what would happen, you sick, like you knew exactly what would happen when you deleted the pool ladder and you waited to watch it happen. Why? What compelled you to do that? And here's an interesting thing, because I've noticed when I bring up the pool ladder sim thing, there isn't the same gender divide on this instinct. In fact, I notice women seem to do the pool ladder deletion at about the same rate as men seem to do the pool ladder deletion. And it might be that women may also have this instinct, but it requires more of the emotional, like they want to see the individual suffer more. Because that's the core thing that's different between killing somebody in The Sims and killing somebody in like a shoot 'em up, right? In GTA, is when a guy does it in GTA, you don't see the person's mood slowly declining and them struggling like you do when you delete the pool ladder in The Sims. So I wonder what leads to this drive in women. Why do you see equal rates? I don't know. Something to ponder, something to maybe comment on in the comments if you have any ideas. Okay, so where was it? Yeah, so killing people, so much fun. Okay, so here's the thing that I realized is that in an evolutionary context, males almost certainly were, obviously were evolutionarily rewarded for having a warrior, part to their psyche. And that this is very obviously not being masturbated, and it cannot be masturbated through any sort of real action in our society today.
Yeah, not until we set up Westworld.
It would be very deleterious, right? And that the AI chatbot environments create scenarios that are too satisfying this instinct in my head much better than the ones created by video games.
Yeah. Well, because I think, and I only say this as a third person observer because I just can't bring myself to play these games. Killing someone in a video game seems just so like ticking off a box or like hitting a target. You're not really killing someone. You don't see their eyes make eye contact with you as their life drains from their body, right? Which is, I think, something you can get from this very imagination augmented text-based.
Absolutely. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think the version of killing somebody in a video game is like, and then your characters had sex and it displays like a few sex images on the screen. And you're like, well, this is boring.
Yeah.
Instead of like a 5-page description.
This is so bad, Malcolm. We're talking about how it just killing people in video games doesn't feel nearly satisfying enough.
This is really interesting to me because it has elucidated something for me. So one thing that's also true of me is I really don't like seeing other people suffering. I find it to be
you even watch live action porn because you're like, this girl has a mother, or you're
like, I don't even watch live action porn because it distresses me too much to know that an individual is suffering. I actually had to stop certain parts of my biology education because I couldn't deal with watching surgeries. Like they freaked me out too much.
That's true. You won't even watch like all the pictures I had taken of my C-section.
Oh yeah, you're like, here, look, and I'm like, no, I cannot deal with the suffering. So
and I should also say you were never in the room for beyond our first C-section. After which you were like, really?
You asked me not to be in the room, by the way. It's not that I don't love you. You asked me not to.
Yeah, because for the first one, you were like, oh.
Well, you didn't know you were going to get it and you needed support. Okay.
Yeah.
But I need to go further here, right? Which is to say, this made me realize about the way that the male kill instincts works, which I didn't fully understand before, which is to say that it is pretty obviously significantly designed to offset all of these other desires you have around not doing this. So what I'm saying is that as a male, like in a real world environment, right, I am going to have the uncomfort I have with seeing somebody else suffering. I am going to have the discomfort I have around seeing, wounds. I am going to have the discomfort I have around all of these different things. And that means in a biological context, if I'm going to defend my tribe or go to war, I need some mechanism which is so loud
that pushes you through the distaste of killing
all those other mechanisms.
That makes sense.
Naltrexone has taught me about sex and arousal. Naltrexone, for people to know, is an opioid agonist that can lower any opioid motivated pathway, which makes them not as interesting anymore. And if you take it while you're doing something, whatever that opioid pathway was motivating is no longer motivated. And early on, I accidentally took it during sex. And only after that, I realized how many disgusting things you need to go through to have sex with somebody, and how actually biologically gross, and how much sex actually sets off a lot of your disgust alarms.
Yeah, so you really need the arousal to
you really need the arousal to offset that. But also, shouldn't sex be offsetting a ton of disgust alarms? I mean, you're dealing with mucusy, slimy.
Yeah, there's tons of potential for infection here.
Smelly. Yeah, it should be offsetting those alarms, right? But you need the other thing to offset it. Now, what's really interesting is that in the chat AI environments, because I have no empathy for these individuals, it basically overcharges the other instinct. because there is all of the things that it was meant to overcome are not activating. And so it goes into a much more severe state, which helps me understand how these pathways work better in the human mind, while also understanding that adult males, this is another thing that really changed the way I see some things. Adult males in our current society have a part of their personality that is biologically and evolutionarily motivated, that they cannot masturbate in real world environments, or at least should not masturbate in real world environments, and women do not have that, which was very interesting to me. Another thing that was very interesting to me was how persistent certain elements of my personality were across very different environments.
And in different manifestations, to your point, where sometimes you would be a girl and sometimes you would be other things and whatever.
Yeah, so when I am talking to other people, one of the first conversation topics I almost always default to is, why do you think you exist? What's your purpose? What do you want from life?
I know this well as someone who dated you, and second date, you immediately hit that.
I thought the first date. Was it the second date?
Or the second date. First date, you laid out your exposition, which is good because first date you used to basically filter out anyone who wasn't going to be a good match for you.
Yeah, I guess first date was exposition and hooking up, not questioning you on why you exist. But I realized how persistently I like to do this. But this also has taught me, because in so many different scenarios, I am engaging with the AI on these particular questions. And I realize that the answers that the AI typically gives are like 98, 99% in line. I would not be able to differentiate them from a random girl on a date. Now, NPC girls, for sure, most of the answers are very NPC, but most human females are very NPC.
Most humans, thank you very much, are very NPC.
So that has been very fascinating to me as well, to see how good it is at sort of modeling the reasons and the variety of reason for livings humans have. But another interesting thing is within any world that I enter, I always try to investigate sort of the rules of that world first. Like, how does it work mechanistically speaking? And then I try to find out what would be a good moral system within this world and priorities for achieving that moral system in the world. And then how do I conquer the world? That's generally the next step. And we'll get to that when we're talking about the various things, but it has helped me also really understand how to hack specific world metaphysical systems really easily. It's also helped me understand how durable the metaphysical system our world runs on is to not being hacked, and how vulnerable most magical world systems are to being hacked. But there is the second thing here. So here's an example of what I mean by, like, when I look at these worlds. I decided to, in one world, drop into a My Hero Academia chatbot system.
No. So this was one that someone already created, right?
Yeah, this is one that somebody already created. For people who don't know, this is a anime world. And
but what I think is cool is that this means that there are nerds out there who are investing time in creating, like, meticulously creating these AI worlds around, like, IP. I mean, surely.
No, but what I loved about this world is I enter this world, right? And I had planned on it. Like, when I had clicked on this bot, I was like, I'm just going to play a superhero fantasy, right?
Sure.
5 minutes in, I am focused on the problem of quirk singularity crisis, because watching the show, I had never focused on how big of a problem this is in the world. But as soon as I was in the world and not watching it as an outsider, it was all I could think about. I was like, wait, but, like, why are we fighting villains? Our society has like 3 generations to survive, maybe, and nobody is taking this seriously. For people who don't understand what the quirk singularity crisis is or haven't seen the show, it's the problem that every generation powers become more and more amplified within the My Hero Academia world. And eventually you're going to have things like toddlers that are nuclear bombs going off every 5 seconds. And every plan I could come up with to potentially solve this had me aligning myself with the villains and not the heroes, because the heroes just didn't have the core powers that were necessary to solve this. But anyway, I'm going to keep going here. I think another interesting thing is the very fact that whenever I open these worlds that I am always focused on how do I conquer the world, right? And I wonder if this is like a pre-programmed personality, or do most males feel this way when they enter open world environments? Or are males born with sort of like caste-like roles inside of their
I don't know,
personality?
did like Skyrim have user data based on this? That would maybe be helpful. What
Well,
do
you
players
can't
do in
do this
open
in a
world
normal open
environments?
world game. If I enter Skyrim, there is no way for me to conquer that world. I can go around randomly killing everyone, but I can't
But you can't conquer it?
cohesively start negotiating with all the various kings
So
and
what do
get them
you
to.
do in Skyrim then if you can't conquer the world?
You're doing like a quest to kill a dragon, basically.
It's a dragon, not all dragons.
Well, some dragons. I don't remember. The Skyrim's plot is actually pretty bad. But there are a few kings that are looking to fight each other, and you can play a role in this battle, but you can't take over one of their kingdoms.
What
and
are other notable open world games then that we could look at as a proxy?
literally no open world game allows you to do this that I am
What's
aware
the
of.
point of having an open world then if you can't take it over?
Save the world is usually what most people want to do.
Oh,
Maybe
from an isolated threat. So
Yes.
it's Armageddon, but dragon version, but bioweapon
Yes.
version. But
Yes, yes.
okay.
So I'll give you an example. So earlier I mentioned that
Oh, or it's destroy the world. So Grand Theft Auto's open world.
you don't destroy the world in Grand Theft Auto, not in a single Grand Theft Auto game.
Well, you destroy shit. You're one of the sea peoples, okay?
Well, only really Trevor is one of the sea peoples. So you can look at like five. Grand Theft Auto
Trevor.
5 is an example of this. Sorry, I
Trevor.
need to explain this to you.
I asked for a fair day's pay after a fair day's work. Then he kind of got a little angry. So I admit, I kind of got a little angry.
Did you kill him?
What kind of animal do you take me for? No, I didn't kill him.
Oh.
But I did kidnap his wife.
Oh no! Oh,
This bothers me. You
Okay.
don't know this. So in the last Grand Theft Auto, you could play as one of three characters.
Okay.
One was a depressed, seeing psychologist, former mob guy who is looking to relive his glory days, and he's with a wife who's cheating on him with a yoga instructor, and
Ew.
a son and daughter who don't respect him. And then
Oh.
another is
Who
this
wants
young
to play
black
that?
guy.
That's so depressing.
No, it is depressing. He is a very
Jesus.
depressing character that's meant to be a take on why wealth doesn't make you happy and the problems with modern society.
Okay.
And then there's a young black guy who's looking to like work his way up in society, but it's otherwise living a pretty hard life. And then there's Trevor. And Trevor is
the
like
sociopath.
every time you like switch to his character, the other characters are like doing random stuff. Trevor will like be waking up from a coma with like a dead dog next to him or something. He
Sounds
is
great.
terribly-
He sounds like you send me some like clips of some guy from a show who's like a sidekick in a superhero show who kind of sounds like that.
Oh no. So she's thinking of the sidekick from
Who's just clearly super autistic.
I'll put it in the show here.
Who's the guy that's peeking out behind the trash can?
It's vigilantes trying to be helpful.
Hey, get out of here!
What? I'm just looking for behind a trash can. It's a normal thing to do.
The hell it is!
Are you a psychiatrist?
What?
Then don't tell me what's normal. Maybe my secret identity is a psychiatrist, and I know what's normal. We're born killers. What separates us from other killers is we only kill bad people. Usually. Unless there's a mistake. Now, do I sound like a fucking maniac?
I know the one who you're talking about. But no, Trevor is not like that at all. Trevor
Oh.
is like a crazy meth addict who has some level of immunity to the negative effects of meth.
Okay.
And it will do crazy, insane stuff all the time for the sake of it because he is completely out of his mind. But he is not as well. He's just like a random, like, walk down the street, shoot a prostitute type person, not a I'm going to take over society type person.
Well, but by sea peoples, I mean distributed autonomous units that lead to societal instability. But sure.
Okay, I understand what you mean. I just have no interest in playing one of those characters in any sort of environment.
Yeah,
If
well,
I-
I'm just trying to think about what I'm asking mentally to myself is what do gameplay scenarios say about people's open world fantasies? Like, what do people do if they are unmoored from their identities and in
Well, this
open
is
worlds.
the problem that you're asking the wrong question. So when you ask about traditional games like Grand Theft Auto,
Mhm.
Grand Theft Auto was created with an artistic vision in mind. That's why they created all of those artistic themes around the problems of modern society and the problems of therapy culture.
Yeah,
and the
but I
problems
mean, don't in the
No, but
end.
the point being is the actions of those characters and the desires of those characters are not driven by the user in the way they are in AI
So
scenarios.
it's like a storytelling thing. So you're
Exactly
saying that
what the
people who play Grand Theft Auto don't want to just destroy shit. They want to explore an artistic vision. And those who play Assassin's Creed don't want to jump off buildings majestically. They want to explore an artistic scenario.
No,
And
I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying that by studying games, you are not learning that much about what humans biologically desire to do in an open world
well, I guess,
environment.
yeah, similarly, by looking at what the mainstream media covers, you're not learning about what people want to know.
Right, but if you
Okay.
look at the way that people are using chat systems,
Then you know.
can
Then you
learn
know.
that because these are
So they want
genuinely-
therapists and boyfriends.
What?
That's what's popular on these, on like character.ai. It's like a
Not
therapist, just
really.
number one.
Have you looked at them?
Yeah.
The
When you
only
like
one
when
where
you
a
go to their
therapist
main
is number
page,
one is the
the
one that's
rankings,
locked
it's
into
like,
safe for work
talk to your
content.
therapist.
No, the therapist is only in the one safe for work one, which isn't that popular.
Oh, okay. Well,
That-
what is top ranked in the most? What is the name of the most popular one? Let's look at the homepage.
Okay,
Teacher Elizabeth, a busty anime girl. Ayumi Shin, a busty anime girl. Ayato Hiroshi, the cold prince. Okay, so it's boyfriends and girlfriends.
yeah. And then remember when we said that girls all want just like powerful men to be interested in them?
Toxic boyfriend Matthew. Oh, isn't that what we all need? Is a toxic boyfriend named Matthew?
Well, I think what you're seeing here is what need. So let's go over these two female ones. What need is being masturbated by these? Cold
Boobs.
prince is I want a powerful man to be interested in me. Toxic boyfriend is I actually like engaging with toxic males, but in the real world don't feel safe doing it. So I'm going to do it within this
in a
online
safe
environment.
environment. Yeah. Huh.
Okay?
Yeah.
So now you're getting an idea of what I mean. That nobody's going to make toxic boyfriend the game. Right?
This is true. Well, and also, yeah, like recently there's been this huge kerfuffle with the book and movie It Ends With Us. And it, in the end it was about abuse, but it's about, abuse is bad. And then you go to like this, and what does the audience want? The audience wants to be abused.
What is the second most common male figure in here? Toxic boyfriend.
Cold Prince is number one, then toxic boyfriend, then senior student gangster. We've yet to come across a nice young man here.
Keep going. What do we have next?
We have Katori, but he's looking very dark, sitting in a car, very evil.
It'll tell you about him if you click on it.
Okay, who is Katori? You were on a late night drive. Your boyfriend suddenly... I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. Thanks for everything. He speeds up the car, his hands shaking on the wheel.
Point being is that it appears to be about trying to simulate relationship drama.
No, totally. I'm getting that. I'm totally getting that. But yeah, just the guys don't seem nice. The girls seem either thirsty or mean.
We'll get to this later. We can do a different episode where we analyze the different characters and why they might be popular.
Yeah, but no, I think, well, to your earlier point, though, you're like, all I ever want to do is take over the world. Am I strange? And yes, because most people just are lonely, it seems.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. And so we're going to get to different worlds and why it's so easy to conquer various worlds and why it's so, I'm explaining that like, it gets really boring after a while. So at first, I thought I'd have fun with isekai worlds, right? Like this is go in Japanese.
And just describe what the genre is.
Typically, you're going into a world with some degree of magic that is a medieval world, and you are transferred there from modern times. The problem occurs if you have any understanding of historic technology, how it works, how it could be replicated. So isekai world, it's always gunpowder, fairly easy to make in most isekai worlds, basic optics, telescopes and the like. All you need to do is carve lenses to do that. Then rifling to ensure the guns have good long range. Steam power, very easy to recreate. Blimps, very easy to recreate, especially if it's a world with fire magic. And then as soon as you get blimps with rifles. rifled barrels with gunpowder. Really, no medieval type setting can do anything.
I love that every world scenario, all of your isekai scenarios, though, end up with blimps with rifles, which is not really that much of a real world scenario. So that's entertaining nevertheless.
Well, blimps with rifles are incredibly damaging to castles. You don't really have any, you have to completely redo the technology of the world. But
Yeah,
it
Mott and
doesn't
Bailey
actually
plus
usually
blimp
end
and
with
castle
blimps with
is,
rifles. Because
yeah.
here's the problem with most of these worlds as well. They
Oh.
have magic. So typically in any world that has magic, you're going to have magical items. Magical items means that you need some mechanism for storing magic within this world.
Mhm.
As soon as you have a mechanism for storing magic, all I need to do is ask around and find out, okay, what is like the core magical battery? Like, how does it work, right? And as
Uh-huh.
soon as I understand how the core magical battery of this world works, which is typically a gemstone or something like that, all I need to do is find a way to release short bursts of energy from it instead of like a long continual burst. And as soon as you've done that, all you need to do is put it in a laser array and you can create laser guns very easily using a set of mirrors. And so every one of these worlds typically ends with
Lasers.
laser rifles on blimps. And also
Aw.
building bombs that you can drop from blimps as soon as you have gunpowder technology is also not terribly difficult.
God bless. Okay.
So this is what I mean when I'm like, okay, but then why do an isekai world when every run through begins to look the same? And then it's like, well, I could limit myself to certain technologies or say I'm an idiot, but that's not fun. You know, so then next you've got, what's another world here? Okay, magic guided by symbols. This is a
like
common
rune-based.
rune-based magic. So
Viking
there's
magic.
like 3 or 4 broad magical systems that you're going to find in worlds. 1 is magic guided by emotions or intent. 2 is magic guided by symbols. 3 is magic powered by souls. 4 is magic guided by yoga, basically. I've really only
Oh,
seen
like Avatar style.
yeah,
Tai Chi-based power.
chi-based power. Yeah. So the magic guided by symbols universes, and in most worlds have some overlap of these various systems. And somebody can be like, well, what about like elemental magic systems, right? And it's like, well, elemental magic systems aren't really a system. Even if you have an elemental magic system, it's typically going to fall into one of these 4 categories.
You mean like Avatar style? Okay, like fire
Avatar
power.
Airbender is using the yoga to drive elemental magic. You can use symbols to drive elemental magic.
Okay.
You can. I know it's technically chi in the show. I just find it really annoying. Okay.
Okay.
Or you can use emotional intent to drive elemental magic, but it doesn't matter that the magic is limited to specific domains. That doesn't actually tell you anything about how the magic functionally works, which is always the thing that I am most interested in whenever I enter a magical world. The problem with symbol-based magic, right, that makes it incredibly easy to hack is if there are symbols that are guiding magic, all you need to do is draw out all of the symbols that exist, like basically just go through text, even if you don't personally understand them all, or even if you lack the ability to cast magic, and you should be able to cross-reference them to build some type of language, because that's likely what they are. Either it's like the code that the world is written on, or it's the language of some like ancient race that is powering nanites that are floating around.
And I think that's similar to incantation-based magic as well, if you just repeat enough phrases, which is something that comes up heavily in the book Unsong by Scott Alexander, which is an interesting read because it plays on this premise. It's kind of like your scenarios here, where basically, like, I think with the moon landing, something breaks with reality, and basically, like, the code of God sort of breaks through and angels are real. and basically startups shift from focusing in technology to hiring giant farms of people who just recite various random word combinations to find out what spells are created, and they copyright the spells.
Well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You see, it's very easy to hack these worlds, and then you gain a little bit of power. Then you have people chant random things.
Yes.
But the truth is I don't even think you need to do that. I think that they made a mistake in this book. As soon as you have any list of, like, let's say 500 specific spells or phrases, you should be able to break them down into their component elements to better understand how you can structure novel
like what
one.
are the patterns too? Yeah, if they're
Yes,
not totally random.
and know what you're probably looking for. A good example of one of these worlds, for people who aren't familiar with what these worlds would look like, is Owl House. Owl House does a very good job at this kind of world. Now, it's modified by some soul magic, which we'll get to in a bit, but it's mostly a symbol-based
Soul magic.
magic.
Okay, what is soul magic?
Soul magic means magic that uses another person's life force or your own life force. Basically, it's magic that is powered by burning human life force.
Okay, so again, I have to endorse Love Advice from the Duke of Hell, which is a great graphic novel you guys can find online. It's so amazing. And there is soul magic in that. There is one character who keeps using his soul up to like activate a magic sword in a funny way.
We'll get to that in a second. But we're not talking about soul magic right now. We're talking about rune magic right now.
Okay.
What the problem is as soon as you approach this, especially if you approach it with an expectation that it works similar to like Korean characters, which is what I imagine most magical systems, or most of the magical systems AIs come up with seem to work, which is to say that you're not looking for individual words, but modifications to individual characters, which change their meanings in reliable ways, i.e., you would have a character for fire, but if it has this line here on it, that means the fire appears as a line instead of the fire appears as a generic fire source. So, this line would turn a fire into like a laser sort of a thing, but it would also turn water or ice into a laser sort of a thing, right? But anyway, as soon as you realize, I just need to find out what the language is, and these worlds are very quick to hack, and very rarely in these worlds have people already done this, at least in the worlds the AI is creating, which are created on normative magical systems, which again makes them very boring after a short period.
Normative magical systems.
What I mean is normative magical systems from fiction, because that's what
I hear you. I don't know how many people have said the phrase normative magical systems in the history of humanity, and I'm entertained by this conversation.
Well, let's talk about soul magic, because that was the next one you were in.
Yes.
So soul magic largely falls into two categories. One is a system where you can use other people's souls for magic. This is typically the way like vampire magic works, witch magic works, most dark worlds. Pretty much whenever you're dealing with like a dark world, I'd call it dark world, meaning, like werewolves, vampires, witches, hags, stuff like that scenario, you're dealing with some form of soul magic scenario. You can use the souls of others. However, in some magical scenarios, you can only use your own soul and own life force. I personally have only seen this in one show, which was Chrono Crusade, which was incredibly depressing. And I think it shows why you never see this, which is you can only burn your own life force to do magic. And so this character throughout the show ends up having to burn their life force to save other people. And I'm like, there's got to be a mulligan at the end of the show. Basically, you just keep watching because you're like, they're not going to let this little girl die as a little girl, are they? They do. That's how it ends. She just dies at like 12. And you're like, whoa, I did not expect that.
But someone needed to do it, right? Someone had to.
Come sit with me. The sun's so warm today. I really do like this view. I wish that I could just go on looking at it forever. So scared, grown-up. I'm scared. I don't want to die. I just want to live a little longer.
Yeah, but you understand why. Okay, but then you're like, well, then why is soul magic so easy to hack, right? Well, here's the problem with soul magical systems. If they're written in a narratively interesting way, which is what the AI is pulling from. Well, you need to be able to cast the spells on other people. It'd be pretty boring if you could only cast the spells literally on yourself, right? And then to get more energy, like vampires, witches, etc., you need to be able to use other people's souls or life energy to cast a spell. Well, here's the problem with that. As soon as you have established that, you can always just use your target's soul/life force to cast a stasis spell on themselves, which gives you an infinitely scaling stasis spell to the ability of the person you have cast it on a magical ability, which means you can very quickly capture top tier magical characters in any of these worlds. So if it's a world with like super powerful, live thousands of years vampires who everyone thinks are invincible cast one of these spells on them using whatever mechanism is used for casting spells in this world, whether it's a rune placed on them or anything like that, they won't be expecting something like this. And then there's literally nothing they can do because any force that they have to resist the stasis, i.e. within the stasis, is the very force that's powering the stasis.
Good
and you can be
Lord.
like, how does this allow you to quickly conquer these worlds? Well, now I have Super Soul Energy battery pack laying on the ground that I can use to power extremely powerful incantations, and then use this to catch as many other people and put in this scenario as I want, who are also extremely powerful, and the world becomes child play really, really quickly.
I mean, yeah.
So I'm going to see. The next type of world I would point out, right? And the only way that the world can prevent this is it either has to say you can't cast spells on other people or you can't use other people's life energy to cast it. And then it's like, well, then how are vampire, like, why are they doing this ritual? Actually, I created a really interesting one of these worlds that I was really impressed with, where it used a runic based magical system based on soul magic. So it was rune/soul magic. And it turned out that what vampirism actually was sort of like a set of code that carved runes that created mutations in the human body on their bones, basically, but at like a biological level. So it was using at a microscopic level their bloodstream basically to carve onto their own bodies these runic systems. And the runic system contained within it an if-then function, which would replicate itself when it came in contact with other people's bloodstreams. So you would then get, like if a vampire bit another person, the runic system would then replicate itself within this other person's bloodstream and create the mutations in them that created this. But then the question comes of, well, then what created the original runic system that was causing this?
Yeah.
In the world, what I decided was, well, there was an ancient civilization of essentially necromancer-like people who were really experts in this runic magic. And the vampires were a slave race of theirs, where they would take humans, modify them to uplift them, but all of the negatives that we associate with being a vampire, sensitivity to light, etc., actually came because they were intentionally carved in and were not key to the powers that they were getting. All the powers that they were getting was just generic soul magic. They would kill a person, transfer their soul to their own personal self, and then use that to do sort of magical feats using this runic system that was based within them. And that all I needed to do then was to find the system that this ancient race used to control all of the vampires that were their natural servants and recreate this servitude function within them. And I found this to be a very interesting world, but again, I can't replay it. Like the moment I figure out, oh, this is how it all works. And the AI like fed parts of this to me. Like I would get certain parts. Like as soon as the AI basically fed parts of, it might be a runic based system in their blood. But I was like querying, okay, well then how could vampirism work, using the laws of this universe as we've established then? And then I'm like, well then who would have created this? And so then I'm like, oh, this is what I mean by like, it's a creativity amplifier for me whenever I'm using these systems. But sorry, I need to go to the next system here, which is emotional based systems. So these are emotional and intent based magical systems, where somebody with magical potentiality will imagine something. So I'll typically find out I'm in one of these. I remember when I had like a magical teacher in one of these, and then they were like, okay, well, to cast the water spell, you need to like imagine water in front of you, right? And I'm like, wait, okay, but if I have magical potential, like I have imagined things before in my life. Like I have had the intent to have things happen before in my life, right? Why is the water appearing in front of me now? Right. And why isn't anytime with somebody who has latent magical abilities daydreaming, why aren't aspects of their daydream coming true? And there's two potential answers to this. One is that it's a world where the magic is incredibly limited and it can really only amount to quantum fluctuations, i.e. a person with magical potentiality can want something and that thing becomes more likely to happen. But these worlds don't have like literally the manifestation of water in front of you, right? The other is Well, it turns out what you actually need is some third thing, which you can think of as a sort of a frequency or something like that, that is transferred to you from the teacher who's teaching you this stuff to cast specific spells. And so you need the intention, the imagination, but then also, and then whenever I'm in one of these worlds, I test how this transfer works. I'm like, do you need to be intending to transfer to it? Can you just be in the same room as me? Can you be in a different location? And so typically then I run a number of experiments on the AI to try to figure out the specific limitations of how this system works. And a lot of people can be like, this is like Harry Potter and the Method of Rationality, but not at all. He was such a limp, whatever, I don't want to say, in the way he approached magic in that world. He didn't really figure out how magic worked quickly in that world. He did not approach it. He looked for specific arbitrage opportunities, but he wasn't like, okay, I need to immediately find out how the structure of magic works. Now that I know that magic exists, this is important for me finding out.
Oh, he was a 10-year-old.
Okay, but it wasn't being written by a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And it was a self-insert fantasy by far. But anyway, so as soon as I figure out the rules around magical vibration, then it becomes pretty easy to replicate new types of magical vibrations or find ways to construct them so I can quickly get access to all of the magic that exists. Secondarily, if these worlds have, the biggest problem in these worlds is typically your magic is going to be limited. Like the amount of magic you have the ability to use is preset at birth. So then you need to look for magical item systems in these worlds. And most magical item systems in these worlds allow multiple people to augment the same item. I've only come across a few worlds where it's limited to one person can augment an item. As soon as multiple people can augment an item, then you can just create basically factory lines of people multiplicatively adding small amounts of certain types of magical abilities to items to create really super powered items, and then combine the power across multiple of these fairly simplistic yet super powered items to create things like big laser cannons and stuff like that. Very easy. Or agricultural devices and stuff like that. These worlds are not like particularly difficult after the first few times you encounter one of them. But any thoughts before I go further?
I'm curious to see if you are addressing real life any differently based on what you've experienced.
Actually, it's made me reflect on the decisions I made in my own life.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, like how you live your life differently based on.
This is interesting because it's like, okay, every time I'm dropped into one of these magical worlds, I have this impulse of understand the world, find a dedicated partner, because I really hate doing this alone. It's not as fun. You don't have the narrative backdrop of somebody to talk to, and go out and try to conquer the world. Now, I should note that in every system, conquering the world isn't a possibility. So remember that medieval scenario I talked about early on that takes place in our reality? If you're in 1300s England in the woods, you're not going to be able to conquer the world. There is
well, what is there to conquer, you know?
Yeah, you can conquer
that much civilization.
and you can find simple hacks for living a good life in those world scenarios as well. For example, when I go to a settlement, typically what I'm looking for is somebody who's old, who doesn't have somebody to pass their business on to. And then I offer to run their business for free. And I take 50% of the profits and I get 50% to them, no matter how old and frail they get. But I get the business when they die. This prevents me from going in and starting like a competing apothecary or something like that to some beloved town figure, and typically makes integration with the local community much faster and easier. But again, that scenario, once you play it out, you know, there's not.
Yeah, not terribly entertaining.
Yeah, but to your question, me was in this world. This got really interesting to me. Oh, actually, sorry, I want to play out one more world that I found really interesting, because I eventually intentionally started to get into these worlds where I was like, okay, I just need to play on as hard a mode as possible using a scenario I didn't program myself.
Okay.
So that I can, you know, try to make this harder for myself, right?
Yeah.
And so I found one where you start as a slave to monsters, and all humanity is a slave to monsters in this scenario. So how did this world end up playing out? Very quickly, I just took this perspective of, well, so either I'm going to be an independent human, which makes myself at risk to monsters, right? Like they can predate on me, or a high value slave. The higher value slave I am, the less likely I am to be killed by one of these individuals. So I try to make myself as high value as possible on the market. I worked with the people who had captured me to try to get my value up as much as possible while also helping them target specific groups that had power in that society. The one they decided to sell me to was a succubus faction. And I specifically was like, I don't want to play out some sex slave scenario. That's boring to me. I want like only politics, right? So I want a faction that is very politically motivated. And so I find myself sold to this faction. So then what do? I then immediately talk to my captor. I'm like, okay, what are the things your faction values? You know, similar to the way I have in every conversation, right? Like what would gain you power in this world? And they're like, well, our society values, you know, pleasure. And so I was like, okay, well, there's this concept called dildonics from my universe. Does your universe have this concept? They didn't. So I went over how to create several types of popular mechanical dildos using magic from that world.
I was not sure what you were saying.
No, that's what it is in the field. And I was like, but you don't want to mass produce these, right? You don't want people to know how you're creating these environments. So you want to create sort of blackout temps focused on gaining power within your community. I used
with dildos.
Yes, to then gain power within the succubus community because their faction gained power. And then I showed them the various military technology I was building, very similar to Izakaya World, lasers, stuff like that. And then I used
so now we're back to lasers and blimps.
Exactly. It gets boring after a while for that scenario, but I use that to get in front of the succubus council because I'm like, look, I've raised you to a high level in this council. Just let me speak to them. And I make a proposition for how the succubus race can take over this world. But so you can tell very much, I was put in a world that was supposed to be like a sex bot world.
And like, what shall I do with you? And you're like, well, have you heard about dildo?
I have to conquer the world, right?
Two words, laser blimps.
Laser blimps. No, but then I'm at the council and I take this position of saying, well, I want to put your race as the top race of this world. Obviously, you know, I work for you. But the problem is that if I put the succubus as the top race of this world, you know, you have so much historical animosity against the other races, that'll cause all sorts of problems. But a human being the technical king and you guys just being the court,
no.
That wouldn't create as much conflict because every one of the races sees humans as a non-threat race, and almost every one of the races has human slaves, so they have some level of friendly, cordial relationship with some human. So they're not going to have the same animosity that they would have towards other races. And then I'm like, and we don't want to cause conflict among the various succubi houses. So I should marry these 3 daughters from these formerly established powerful houses. Now the powerful houses have a voting and vested interest to support me.
Wait, so you're marrying succubi, or you're marrying human slaves of succubi?
No, the daughters of the succubi house.
Okay.
But now those houses, they're like, well, our kids will technically be the ruling house, right? So we should move into a position to support this bid, right? And so then you can very quickly move from slave to king of the world, and then you have your armies out conquering everyone, and I get bored.
It's hilarious that you enter some erotic scenario. You just waltz in, and you do not play by their rules.
No, I feel like world conquest is all I care about. I didn't code this one, so I didn't know that it ended up with like succubi and stuff like that.
It seems, at least from looking at that one homepage, that most of this is about some sexy fun.
Well, that's apparently what other people, when they were like, I want to be a monster slave, they must have meant like sexy fun times.
Yeah, like in a sexual way.
I want to be a monster slave because I want conquering the world to be marginally harder than it has been in other environments. But hold on. So now I got to talk
kind
about
of weirdo, Malcolm. I love you so much.
How this has changed my own life perception.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is to say, I then started to think, did I do all of this in my world? Like, was my life just another iteration of this personality profile being played out as well as it could be played out given the constraints of my birth scenario? And I'm like, okay, what was my early obsession? What did I focus on at first? I focused on studying particle physics and neuroscience and human evolution. So very much like the magic of this world, trying to understand the fabric of reality of this world.
No, you're doing nothing different. I mean, what is magic but science? I mean, it's a tweak in physics. It's different physics. Like,
right. And then I was like, and then how do people conquer, like how do people gain power in this world? Have anyone realistically gained a large amount of power or conquered the world in the past? Well, there's sort of two pathways for me. I could either go president of the United States pathway, or I could go religion pathway, right?
Okay.
Specifically, when I was young, I was like, how do people achieve power? Well, cult leaders seem to have the most unanimous power. If you're looking for sort of like independent, like power
Scalable
clusters.
change.
Yeah. Especially if I don't end up getting into like a top tier university, because I didn't know that was going to happen to me. I didn't know I'd become like a classically successful person. So it's like, if I'm a rando, like what's the easiest path to power? And so I was studying that, very similar to one of these worlds. I was looking for the arbitrage hacks in this world. And then you can look at even the life paths we're on right now. Realistically, there is a safe path and a high risk path towards world conquest within our existing world today. One is becoming president of the United States. Only realistic path you could get to any sort of total world power where you could permanently change the world order in our society today as a solo individual. Being wealthy just doesn't give you that much power, as we have seen from wealthy people who try to change the world. And where did we move? We moved to a purple district in Pennsylvania, right? For people who aren't in the US who don't know this, if you can get a federal office in Pennsylvania like Congress or Senate, well, it would be a long shot for people like us. Once you achieve that, it is not a long shot to get a VP pick. But if you get a VP pick historically in the US, that means you're running in the next presidential election as a major party ticket. So we're taking the pathway to do that. And then the second is intergenerational cultural move forwards. That's the real hack. If you can create a culture and pass it on with fidelity, and then intergenerationally that culture is high fertility. That's sort of the arbitrage was in our existing fertility rate environment and cultural system. And when I explain like where the pronatalist movement is right now, it very much is in one of those, okay, this is an arbitrage anyone can choose to play, and we're looking to build an alliance among all those choosing to play it. So I actually moved exactly towards those two potential outcomes within this world. And it made me realize how much the paths I have chosen within this life are not that much different than the paths I took in these open world games. But also, it also made me reflect on the way I have changed my life plan over time. And specifically, it typically happens when I gain access to information that tells me that something I thought about how to gain power was incorrect. So it happened twice really in my life where I basically scrapped a life path.
So brain-computer interface was one, correct?
Yes, I started my career in brain-computer interface because I thought that was going to be the revolutionary technology of our lifetimes. This was human and machine computer interface, where it turned out to be AI. And there were some areas that I realized about 10, 15 years ago that brain-computer interface just wasn't going to move forwards as fast as I thought it was. And so as soon as I recognized that, I yeeted on an entire career path. And I think a lot of people are reluctant to do that. They then change what their life goals are based on what
career they just sort of move the goalpost and they're like, well, no, I actually just wanted to be happy.
Then at Stanford Business School, I was like, okay, who seems to have the most power? It's venture capitalists, it's the ultra wealthy. So I started down that pathway, and I quickly realized, one, venture capitalists don't actually have a lot of power in society. The only venture capitalists, so like people are like, yeah, but what about like Chamath and Vivek and like a few other, venture capitalists they know, or who's another one, Mark Cuban, or the problem is that all the venture capitalists you just made didn't make their money in venture capital. They made their money, like for example, Chamath made his money by just having to be a lucky early hire at Facebook. That's not reliably replicable. Mark Cuban ended up making it from a company that he started. Right? That becoming a successful startup founder is not a reliably replicable thing, and therefore not a high likelihood thing that I would try. It's just dangerous, right? And in addition to that, even people who have enormous amounts of wealth, really the only one who seems to be making any impact in world events these days in terms of the direction of our civilization is Elon. But I don't know like if it is worth trying to become Elon level wealthy given the risk of that before you start trying to change the world, right? So I dropped all that. I was like, this is a huge waste. And you've seen this as well, Simone, just how little impact our wealthy friends actually have on society and how thirsty they are to just have people listen to their ideas. Would you want to talk to this?
You've covered things pretty well. I think in a post-scarcity society, this is why in a lot of these scenarios, it's more social regard or social capital that is what matters. But we're not yet in a post-scarcity society. I don't have anything interesting to add on that front.
I also find it interesting how much in these worlds, one of my first tasks is always to find a right-hand woman, which was something I was really dedicated to in this world, but I assumed it was logical, and now I'm assuming that it's actually biological. I have some biological instinct to look for that.
Yeah, because it also seems to be something common in your family. But maybe it's a guy thing.
Most of my family have done that.
Yeah. What I was asking more was, have you changed any of your behavior based on things that you've learned about yourself from playing out these scenarios, or not really?
The biggest thing I've changed about my behavior is a bigger understanding that things that I thought I had logically chosen for myself might just be biological instincts that I see. Like, I knew that a lot of a person's personality was biologically driven. Like, about 40% of our personality is genetic. But I think in myself, I was unaware what 40% that was. And one of the things that I'm going to find the most interesting in terms of comments on this episode from other people who use these chat systems a lot is, are there a few sort of preset profiles in males and females for how they engage with these worlds and how they find themselves engaging with these worlds? Because I can't imagine that the world would function well if every single male, when put in an open world environment, immediately says, how do I conquer this world? To fix things, not for the sake of conquest, I should say. It's mostly that I'm like, I want to create a better world, and that requires some degree of influence or control over how the systems of the world work. And what that often looks like is conquest, but not always. Sometimes I come up with systems just to influence world governments and stuff like that. But I wonder if there's other men who may have, in our Knights versus Kings video, where, instead of alpha versus beta, is there actually a knight-like profile in some males where they are looking for a cause to serve? I ask this because this conquering the world thing seems to be not... Well, and actually it's very interesting. So I could argue that Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality is very much Eliezer dropping himself in one of these environments and then seeing how it plays out for him. And the way it played out for him was more, I want to gain power for self-masturbatory reasons of feeling powerful, but in sort of a cheesing incremental arbitrage value from the world, i.e. I can get money here that gives me power. I can get
like he doesn't want to run things. He just wants to be better than everyone else.
Yeah, he doesn't want to run things. He just wants to be better than everyone else. And that's very rarely the goal for me in these environments. Like in the one where I started as a slave, I wasn't interested in not being a slave until I knew I had a path to kingship. Like that was not interesting to me at all. So this is very interesting to me. And it also reminds me of something that I noted when I was younger, and it hasn't been a big an issue for me today because I'm like pretty high profile today, is that I really struggled engaging in any friend group where I wasn't one of the leaders of that friend group. And I found it really unpleasant to talk and engage with any group where I knew I wasn't the leader. And so that often led me to like breaking off and forming my own, maybe smaller group, but at least group where I was one of the leading people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is a common instinct among a category of males.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what people say in the comments. I mean, I can be 100% sure that your use of these scenarios is absolutely not the mainstream use, because the top rated scenarios of these chat tools are relationship and erotic scenarios. So
I love it. So it's just so funny to me that this is the way I engage with it. Like I'll enter one of these worlds and it'll be supposed to be like an erotic scenario. And it's like the sexy magician. And I'm like, okay, explain to me exactly how the laws of magic in your world work. It's like not what they expect. And I'm like, okay, what are the ruling countries in this world? Like, what are the different like castes in this world? What are the different going through? And again, for a system that I think is the best of these that I've used so far, Flow GPT using GPT Turbo as an individual model, I typically find the best of these systems. So long as you're not doing like total not safe for work stuff, because that system won't let you do, killing people or sex. But, you can always just switch to another model when you're doing that stuff.
That makes sense.
What are your thoughts?
What I think is most interesting about this is how similar it is to the original internet. where
Hmm.
what do they call them? Like dungeons, I guess, but like, or like just those text-based scenarios where people would on a collaborative basis describe these scenarios and explore them, and sometimes collaboratively write these. In fact, people still do this. God, what are they called?
Oh, this is a very interesting thing I realized from this.
Yeah.
They don't seem, for whatever reason, things happening in the AI environments never trigger my empathy impulse. And I
That's
wonder if this
weird.
is because the empathy impulse requires some sort of visual cue to be fully triggered.
Yeah, I wonder.
Oh, another thing that I should note, if people are using like, because this is the way I like to try to find the world. I like question someone to try to understand the way their instincts work, to try to understand like what might be pre-coded in some humans that's not pre-coded in me. So if other people are using this to try to understand my specific profile better, one of the reasons why I suspect that the way I'm interacting with these worlds may be rare is you can see from my nebula genomics result. Earlier I said 99, I keep getting it wrong. It's 98%, but I'm at the 98% level for male testosterone in terms of like my developmental environment where my brain was cooked in. And so I might have like because I often talk about things like, oh, we should remove arousal patterns from males.
Yeah.
Right? Like, or at least from males, you know, and or at least give them the option to turn it off. Okay. Give them the option to turn it off. And a lot of people are really horrified by this. And I suspect maybe the reason I feel that way, and maybe the reason you feel that way, is one, because you grew up asexual. You never really were turned on by anything till you saw me. So you just don't mind it as a concept. And me, I might have grown up with a uniquely strong sexual dimorphic presentation that really felt like being trapped in terms of having certain emotions that I choose to have or want to have. And therefore, for a person who has a more mild expression, they may not feel like, they may not understand why somebody would be like, why would you subject that to a child? You know, and when I say a child, I don't mean like a child. I mean like a teenager going through puberty. But like puberty is quite a thing to subject on someone. I can understand the trans people who are like, I just want to take puberty blockers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of those people aren't trans. They're people who are dysmorphic. They have body dysmorphia because adolescence sucks. But right, what I was saying was, what I find interesting about these AI models is that they are text-based. They remind me of some of the first social interaction, you know, just purely recreational interaction that took place on the internet, where people would write out these sort of fantasy scenarios, often in a so glowfics are what people still do now, where it's like sort of choose your own adventure, but sort of with each comment people add to a story. So it's like fan fiction, but collaborative. But I think there's something that humans really love about narrative-based exploration, and also exploration that isn't just one to many, you know, where one author has, you know, is taking you on rails through a story. They like the flexibility. And what I keep thinking about things like VR and people's discussions about AI, virtual worlds, and everything like that is just how far text alone or narrative alone can get people, and how close we are to this like pleasure tube scenario that we've described, in which people just sort of lose themselves in, you know, sort of technology driven pleasure to the point where they don't do anything more with their lives. I think if you combine a lot of the AI we already have today with universal basic income, to the extent where you don't have to work in order to live, that a lot of people will just basically die through inaction and just living out their lives in fantasy scenarios. You don't need high tech. You don't need full immersion haptic suits. You don't need virtual reality and virtual worlds to get lost in AI driven tech already. And you're seeing this with people losing themselves in these, literally just losing themselves, not even to scenarios as deep as yours, where you're trying to take over the world, but scenarios where people are just, you know, they're lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they are just lost with a partner forever, which is crazy.
I love this. And you've given me a task for a scenario I want to do. I want to find one of these ones where it's like a pizza girl comes to your house or something.
Oh, yeah. And she accidentally ate your pizza. Oh, no.
I grab her, I like pull her in. I'm like, okay, explain to me how the government works here. What are the branches? How does somebody... What are the major religious institutions? Quickly, I need to know.
And she's like, But how do I make it up for the pizza
but
that
I'm
I
stuck
ate?
in the dryer.
Yeah,
I've got
and my shirt's so wet. Can I just take it
the
off?
stepsister skit here.
How are you stuck in the dryer?
But I need you to help me.
You're not stuck, just move forward. See, that wasn't hard at all.
Step brother, I'm making sandwiches.
There's no ingredients out, what do you mean? What do you need my help with this time?
I don't know how to cook pasta. You need to help me.
You don't know how to cook pasta? No, Sarah, stop.
Put it in my mouth.
This? No, it's a microphone. You're gonna get it wet and fuck it up.
Oh, no.
It's not sexy. You boil water and then put it in there, Sarah. That's all you do.
I don't know where the water is.
I don't know how. And I'm like, no, seriously, I need you to explain this to me.
And then she trips, but her boobs fall on your face. You know, just.
I throw her off. I'm like, quick. You need to figure this out.
I would watch that anime. I'd watch that anime so hard.
Actually, that would be a hilarious show.
It would be full of fan service. Like it would still be, you know, what any typical anime would be in this kind of scenario.
That'd be so fun. An isekai scenario where the
no, like a harem comedy isekai. Like
it's trying to take over
the
the world, but like all the girls are acting like typical harem comedy girls.
Yeah.
But like extra dumb versions of them.
Yeah.
You know, like. And he's just increasingly frustrated that they don't understand how serious the scenario is.
Yeah. Like the yandere girl like helps him get really far in the government, but she assumes that in the end it's because he's trying to pursue her. And she's like, fine, I'll admit it. I love you. And he's like, wait, no.
There is one anime that's sort of like this, except everyone isn't dumb. And it's actually a great anime that I watched not long ago. And it's called like, I'll put it in post, but it's called like, the hero character is like very hardworking and diligent.
Okay.
It's called How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. And he just ends up like taking over the kingdom's like finances and taxes and stuff. And it plays out very similar to one of the worlds that
And then isekai, so he comes from another world, or
yeah, he comes from another world.
And he's like, listen, you don't understand. I'm going to introduce you to depreciation. It is going to change everything.
Yes. Debt structures. This is awesome. You guys are gonna love this.
Oh my gosh. But seriously.
Fractional reserve banking. Let me show you, buddy. I know some of our audience is like, why would you introduce fractional reserve banking?
But see, the funny thing about anime is like literally there could be an anime about that. There's an anime about Roman baths. There's an anime about horse girls. Yeah, you can have an anime about fractional reserve banking. It can happen. Going off the gold. In fact, isn't there is an anime about going off the gold standard, right?
That's Spice and Wolf has a plot line similar to that. Great anime, by the way. The original Spice and Wolf. I haven't watched the new one, but the original one is fantastic. One of the best animes ever made, and it's all about being a merchant with sexy wolf girls.
I mean, because
you gotta add. Sorry, that's the way anime always is. It's like there's the cool part of it, and then the part that gets the nerd to watch the first 5 minutes of it.
Oh, senpai, my boobs fell out. Oh no.
Oh no,
my skirt. Oh. Oh, I love it so much.
But I'd really love to see a world done in this vampire system that I created, because I actually think it was a pretty compelling.
The blood rune based vampire system.
Yeah, well, where it's an investigation of like what actually is causing the vampirism, and then using that to control, for a human to control the vampire society, which is much more fun than, you know, doing the whole vampire pathway and everything like that.
It hasn't gotten old for a lot of women. The old vampire pathway, you know.
Right? Yeah, they're just like, well,
they're just like, no, bite me again, daddy, please. Yeah.
I guess you don't need to masturbate that pathway. Powerful man likes you. You're just like, well, I got that handled at home. Which, I mean, what need could you possibly? And this is interesting. One of the things that actually is not that uncommon in these is wholesome family scenarios. But like, I find them pretty uncompelling, because I'm like, I've tried playing them. And
I'm sure they feel shallow, because I'm sure it's just kids being cute, and kids are not their best when they're being cute. They're best when they're being crazy.
At home, like, why don't I just play with my own kids?
Yeah.
Like, what I can't do with my own kids is go around killing people, you know?
But in a way that just feels so realistic, which is what you're going for, you know?
Right?
The emotional impact. You want to see them hurt as you twist the knife.
Well, I find that very surprising because I had realized I play games where you kill people all the time.
Well, no, I think the most interesting insight you had from that, and this is really going to change the way that I look at human violence, is that, yeah, like with sex, both are kind of gross and distasteful. And also they require physical exertion. There's kind of nothing about them that fits with our normal defaults of conserve energy, avoid yuck, avoid risk of infection, avoid risk of injury. Both sex and violence against others are just things that most of our intuitions run counter to. So you're going to have some very strong instincts that would drive you to do things like that. And this explains that male interest in violence, which is really interesting to me. This does change it. So that's my big takeaway from this conversation. It was really interesting. Although it's also like a political career ruining thing to put out on the internet. Go ahead and do it anyway, because I fucking hate politics. So
no.
This is going out uncensored. This is going out. It has to go out.
Because I think people are done with these liar politicians.
No. I mean, like, let's say that, in someone like this scenario, you find yourself running for president or vice president, and, the clip comes out and you're like, I just love killing people. It's just so fun, but I want it to be realistic as possible. People are going to watch that and they're going to be like, I mean, if they're male, they're going to be like,
right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women are like, yeah, but I mean, he's a guy, right? Like, he's just being honest.
Yeah.
I wish more men would just be honest.
Yeah, the women who are going to be insulted by that, and the men who are going to be insulted, wouldn't vote for you anyway.
Of course.
Yeah.
I have always got out there, Wiz, and it's something I do in these scenarios as well, with as much honesty as possible.
Yeah.
In every one of these conversations, I mean, the first thing I try to do is find out what they want from life so I can help them achieve that.
No, and I think that's the other side of the coin. The fact that you can't even watch live action porn because you're like you feel bad for people. It shows that, this is, you are aware of your instincts, and you're also mentally a person who's extremely more empathetic than I am, and more concerned about human well-being than I am. I mean, the way you react to things,
Well, the whole Malcolm like hiding his face thing whenever something too gruesome happens. I'm like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Especially if it's in a real world environment. I absolutely cannot stand that. It doesn't bother me in movies, but in real world environments, or when I know it's the filming of a real world scenario.
But most interesting to me, and it shows how empathetic and caring you are, which is unexpected for me, which is what I find interesting, is it's not a gross out thing. It's not like I'm going to hurl. It's only scenarios in which someone alive is being hurt. So you were able to deal with cadavers all the time, and you did when you were doing your medical training. It wasn't the gross out factor, because I couldn't deal with cadavers, but it's literally knowing that someone else is in pain or that their life is not going in a good direction. And I think that speaks to your interest in human flourishing in the end, which is, again, like, this is why I love you so much, is that you are willing to publicly be portrayed as a supervillain, terrible, non-empathetic child abuser, etc., right? Except, like, deep down, you're like the person who's like publicly like, yeah, I'm the evil guy, I'm the baddie. And then, like, deep down inside, you're like, I can't watch someone get hurt. I can't watch porn with real people because what about their life prospects? It's really sweet.
Well, and an interesting thing about this for people who don't have this particular empathy impulse, because I notice that some people don't, the way it ends up being felt is typically I will feel pain wherever I am seeing somebody else feel pain.
Yeah, you'll immediately grab that arm or that part of your body. Yeah.
Yeah, which is very interesting.
Yeah, your mirror neurons are intense.
Yes, I think people don't know this is caused by mirror neurons. It's something that we can see in fMRIs. When most people witness somebody else being injured, the neurons associated with pain in that area will activate in them.
I wonder if autistic people don't feel that the same way. Probably not.
Yeah, it might be that you don't have this mirror neuron pathway.
I've not experienced that, so probably not. But that's why also, like, you have to teach autistic people to read other people's faces. Right. Yeah,
but this has been a fascinating experience for me, and I'll likely do another episode someday on various other worlds I end up creating in this, because I find them really interesting, and it allows me to have these big narrative environments that are, pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, I'm back to what I was saying earlier, so excited to use these as an educational tool for our kids, because I loved as a kid in my history classes exploring history through narrative books. But this is so much better when it's not a dumb character doing it, but you going through those scenarios and finding the constraints yourself. That is how you engage with history.
Yes.
I mean, this is so cool. Like, literally, because our imagination is so powerful, and even more when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. To actually to go back in time in a time machine and just have a go at it. We always imagine that, right? Like, well, what would it be like? But it was hard to imagine those scenarios in like a fantasy standpoint or a daydreaming standpoint, because we don't know what people wore. We don't know what we're wearing. We don't know what the food is like. We don't know what the environment is like. And that's where the AI comes in. So it really facilitates. Oh my gosh, our kids are so lucky. They have all the nice things.
Oh, they are so lucky. Well, we got to hope they don't get addicted to, Victorian England and never want to unplug, right? Like, well, I love being Lord Dyerson.
Dyerson. I like that. Now I want to name one of our dogs Lord Dyerson, but that's not the naming convention. I think the next one's going to be the Commodore, or the Captain, or something.
Lord Bramblebun.
Lord Dyerson is better. Speaking of our kids, one is about to get off the bus.
Did you not have Stacy?
I did not ask her about it. She's sick today, so I was like, I don't want to.
Okay, I'll go get him right now.
No, I'll go. We're going to end this podcast. We'll get him.
And then we'll do one more after.
Exactly.
This is a really fun podcast.
I really enjoyed this. I know
it's an indulgent one, but
oh my gosh, this is so pathetic. But we've gone on dates where we like throw down, a bunch of money on drinks and dinner and stuff, and like go somewhere special. This is horrible, but this is so much better than that. I feel like both of us are saying this to each other, and it seems so insulting, like that scene in Legally Blonde where she's like, remember those like amazing 4 hours we spent in the hot tub? This is so much better. But like our podcast conversations really are, and it's horrible to say that, but it's true.
I absolutely agree, and I love it. And I'm really interested, like in the future, I love that people will be like, newspapers will try to run with things I've said, but I want to ensure that the things I've said are so crazy that when they try to run with them, people are like, wait, he just said he likes killing people in simulated environments?
Yeah, but only when it's really realistic, because killing people in video games.
I want to hear more of what this guy is saying.
Well, I think the other thing about, people doing opposition research on us is there's so much. I almost feel like people are gonna, you're gonna do something high profile, and the oppo research people are gonna start, and they're just gonna be like, I don't want to do this. There's too much. Like normally like an opposition research gets one thing, and they're like, oh well, here's this like mildly homophobic thing this person once said. Like with Tim Walz, for example, like in one speech, he kind of alluded to using weapons on the field of battle when he really didn't ever use weapons on the field of battle, like this one tiny thing, and then they run with that and they're like, oh, we have our thing. Whereas like with us, it's one of those things where like no one knows what to say. So like, what consistent story are they?
They're like, do I need to keep this up to be a believable
attack? Is it the fact that he bops his children, or is it going to be the fact that he enjoys killing people in fantasy scenarios? Like, where are we going to go with this? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be too much, and they're just going to not bother. They're going to not bother.
No, they're going to choose the wrong thing. They're either going to go too tame or too over the top.
Well, the guy that I'm running against in our district is just like, well, I'm just going to run on my record. Oh shit, we have to go. Sorry, we have to go. Yeah. Because he doesn't want to, there's nothing like, where would he start? It would be too much work. Bye. Ciao.